It is June 2009. Jesse Capen, a 35-year-old hotel concierge from Denver, packs a single backpack. He tells no one exactly where he is going. His apartment walls are covered in maps. He has been planning this for 3 years. He walks into the Superstition Mountains in Arizona. He is never seen alive again. 3 years later, searchers find what remains of him wedged into a remote canyon crevice, 30 feet off the ground. No explanation, no note, no gold. He is not the first. He is not the last. Over 130 years, the same mountain has taken searchers, treasure hunters, geologists, and retired veterans. Some are found, many are not. And the ones who are found, the circumstances never quite make sense. What the official record never mentioned was this: every single disappearance follows the same psychological pattern, the same decisions, the same final location. This is not a story about gold. This is a story about what the mountain does to the human mind. But to understand what really happened, we need to go back to 1868, to a dying man, and a secret he almost kept forever. The Superstition Mountains sit 40 miles east of Phoenix, Arizona. From a distance, they look almost beautiful, jagged volcanic rock rising 5,000 feet above the desert floor. The Apache called them Zilnachacian, big-seated mountain. They were sacred, off-limits, and the Apache were specific about why. The mountains were protected by the Tuarton, the Little People's supernatural guardians, who punished those who entered without permission. Most historians dismiss this as folklore. They probably should not have. The man at the center of this story is Jacob Waltz, a German immigrant, a prospector, a man who arrived in Arizona in the 1860s and somehow, with no recorded mine claim, no business partner, no paper trail, began producing gold. Real gold, high-grade ore, the kind that does not come from a riverbed pan. His neighbors noticed. His neighbors asked. Waltz said nothing. He lived in near poverty in Phoenix, selling small amounts of gold occasionally for cash, never enough to seem rich, never so little as to seem poor. A man carefully managing a secret. In 1891, Jacob Waltz fell ill. On his deathbed, beside a woman named Julia Thomas who had nursed him, he reportedly described a location, a canyon, a landmark, a mine so rich, he said, that a man could fill his pockets in a single afternoon. Then he died. Julia Thomas spent years searching. She found nothing. What she left behind, a fragmented description, later turned into maps, later sold, later copied, later disputed, became the most dangerous document in Arizona history. Everything seemed contained. A legend. A ghost story. Until the bodies started appearing. And they never stopped. The first recorded death connected to the mine is 1931. Adolph Ruth, a retired veterinarian from Washington, D.C., 66 years old, walked with a cane, somehow convinced his son to drop him alone into the Superstitions with a map he believed was authentic. His son agreed. This is the first thing that does not make sense. 6 months passed. A search party found his skull half a mile from his body. Separated, the official verdict was exposure and animal activity. Researchers noted that the scatter pattern was inconsistent with that explanation. Found near his remains a note. It read, in his handwriting, Veni, Vidi, Vici, I came. I saw, I conquered. He had found something. Whatever it was, it found him back. Now picture the search pattern across 130 years. You have a retired bureaucrat in 1931, a young hotel worker in 2009, military veterans, retired school teachers, professional geologists, none of them irrational people on the outside. But the data tells a completely different story about what happens inside that mountain. Researchers who have studied the disappearances note a consistent behavioral signature. Searchers begin making decisions they would never make under normal conditions. They go deeper than planned. They stay later than safe. They separate from partners. they stop communicating. Psychologists have a term for this: goal fixation under scarcity conditions. When a high-value reward is perceived as close, the human brain begins discounting risk. The closer you believe the goal is, the more danger becomes invisible. The Superstition Mountains are architecturally perfect for this trap. Canyons that look shallow and turn deep. Landmarks that repeat. Elevation changes that disorient. Heat that accelerates cognitive decline within hours. Jacob Waltz may have understood this. He survived for decades in those mountains. He knew which risks were real. The searchers who followed him, they had his words, but they did not have his knowledge. But here is where the story takes a darker turn. In 1949, a man named Travis Tumlinson discovered 5 flat stones in the Arizona desert. Carved into them, detailed maps, mining symbols, Spanish text, cross-references to landmarks in the Superstition Mountains. They became known as the Peralta Stones, named for the Mexican mining family allegedly massacred near the mine in the 1840s. Geologists, historians, and institutions were asked to authenticate them. None would, not officially. That absence, that silence, is itself information. The stones were not dismissed as obvious fakes. They were not confirmed as real. They were quietly placed in a category that institutions prefer: inconclusive. A category that requires no action, no explanation, and no public statement. Ask yourself this: if the Peralta Stones were obvious forgeries, why has no institution formally said so in 75 years? And here is what no mainstream account of this story includes. The U.S. Forest Service, which manages the Superstition Wilderness, has specific excavation prohibitions in place beyond the standard wilderness rules. Certain canyon areas require special permits that are, in practice, never granted. This is documented. It is public record. Nobody asks why. The official reason: preservation of archaeological sites. The question nobody has asked officially: whose archaeology? The Apache have maintained for generations that the mountain contains something that belongs to neither the Spanish nor the Germans, nor the Americans. Something older. Something that was there before the concept of ownership existed. Stay with me, because what comes next is the part nobody talks about. The most consistent detail across every documented death in the superstitions is not where people die, it is how they were found. Specifically, the direction they were facing. Nearly every recovered body across different decades, different experience levels, different entry points, was oriented facing the same general canyon corridor, as if they all, at the end, were walking toward the same thing. Here is what the collected record suggests, not as conspiracy, but as observable pattern. The Lost Dutchman's mine may be real. It may not be. That question, after 130 years, remains genuinely open. But the mine itself is not the most important question. The more important question is this: why does this specific mountain produce this specific outcome repeatedly, across generations, across demographics, with near mechanical consistency? The answer has been hiding in plain sight. The Superstition Mountains sit on one of the most geologically unusual formations in North America. Volcanic tuff, layers of compressed ash rock that distort sound, create false echoes, and generate navigational confusion without any technological interference. Researchers studying disorientation events in canyon environments have noted that volcanic tuff formations produce acoustic phenomena sounds that appear to come from the wrong direction. Footsteps that echo back modified. Voices that vanish at close distance. Jacob Waltz spent years in this environment. He adapted to it. He learned which sounds were real, which landmarks held. Searchers who follow his description, they are navigating with their eyes. Waltz navigated with his entire sensory system, calibrated over decades. This is not a supernatural explanation. It is a human one, and in some ways it is darker. The world has been told this is a treasure story. The reality is a survival story. And the people who died were not unlucky. They were underprepared for an environment that punishes overconfidence with absolute precision. Adolph Ruth, 66 years old, walked into that mountain alone, with a cane in Arizona's summer heat, carrying a map he could not verify. Jesse Capen spent 3 years obsessing, mapping, and planning, and still ended up in a crevice 30 feet off the ground, with no recorded explanation for how he got there. The mountain did not take them. The idea of the gold took them. The mountain was simply where the idea led. For 130 years, this has remained the part of the story that no treasure documentary will say directly. Not by accident, by design. Because a story about psychology does not sell maps. It does not sell expeditions. It does not sell the dream. And the dream, it turns out, is far more valuable than any gold. This is not just history. Look at what is happening right now in markets, in technology, in every domain where a high-value reward appears suddenly close. The same cognitive signature appears, the same risk discounting, the same separation from judgment. The Lost Dutchman's mine is not unique. It is a prototype. Every generation produces its version of the Superstition Mountains, an environment where the reward appears real enough and close enough that intelligent people begin making decisions that look irrational from the outside and feel completely logical from the inside. The data tells us the pattern does not change. What changes is only the landscape. Most people who hear this story will remember the gold. They will remember the deaths. They will connect none of it to their own decision-making. Now you can. And that not the location of any mine is the most valuable thing anyone has ever taken out of those mountains. Jesse Capen went into the Superstition Mountains in 2009 with 3 years of preparation, walls of maps, and absolute certainty. The mountain kept all of it. If this story deserved to be uncovered, help us find the next one. Share it with someone who would never expect to need it. Next time, we go deeper into a place the Soviet Union erased from every official map, and the 9 hikers who discovered why. The truth is stranger than the silence surrounding it.